The first time I saw Lucas, the world seemed to slow down, not in a dramatic movie way, but in that quiet moment when something inside you shifts without warning. I was sitting by the window of a small bookstore cafe, lost between the pages of a novel I wasn't really reading, when he walked in. His presence had a kind of calm confidence that filled the room. The kind you notice not because it's loud, but because it feels steady. He asked if the seat across from me was taken. I said no, not realizing that word would open the door to everything that would follow. Back then, I was 28, an editor for a local magazine in a sleepy coastal town called Maple Bay. My life was structured, predictable even. I liked it that way. I woke early, went for runs along the beach, drank too much coffee, and worked late editing stories about other people's lives. But Lucas, he didn't belong to routine. He was spontaneous, with a voice that carried warmth even when he said the simplest things. He worked as an architect, designing homes that he described as shelters for the soul. I used to tease him for that line, but secretly, I admired the way he believed in beauty and meaning. Our connection was immediate but unspoken. We began meeting often at that same cafe, at first by coincidence, then by choice. The conversations flowed effortlessly: books, music, philosophy, the strange way loneliness can live inside even the happiest moments. Lucas had a talent for making ordinary questions sound profound. He'd look at me across the table and ask, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something you can't name?" I didn't have an answer, but his eyes made me think maybe he was the thing I'd been waiting for. Weeks turned into months. Our friendship evolved quietly, like a photograph developing in slow motion. Lucas started coming over on weekends. We'd cook dinner together, though he always managed to burn something. He'd laugh it off, saying, "You can't trust me with the stove, but you can trust me with everything else." I believed him. Maybe I wanted to believe him. Love often begins not with certainty, but with a leap of faith. The first time he told me he loved me, it wasn't during some grand moment. We were walking home in the rain, sharing one umbrella that wasn't big enough for two. I was shivering, and he wrapped his arm around me and said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I love you, Ethan." Just that. No hesitation, no build-up. I remember laughing nervously and asking, "Are you sure?" He smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything." That night, I wrote those words in my journal, afraid I might forget how they sounded. I didn't know then that I'd one day remember them for an entirely different reason. For a while, everything felt easy. Lucas and I created our own rhythm: morning coffee, late-night movies, quiet Sundays at home. My friends noticed the change in me. "You seem lighter," one of them said. I was. I felt seen. Understood. Loved. But sometimes, love hides its own shadows. I began noticing small inconsistencies, things that didn't fit the story we were writing together. It started subtly: missed calls, sudden silences when I entered the room. Lucas would smile and say, "Work stress," and I'd accept that. He had projects all over the state, after all. Still, there were moments when his eyes looked distant, as if he were somewhere else entirely. Once, late at night, I woke to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. The glow from the screen lit his face in cold blue light. I asked if everything was okay. He hesitated before replying, "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." He turned off the phone then, but I noticed how tightly he held it, as if afraid it might reveal something he wasn't ready to share. I tried not to dwell on it. Love, I told myself, requires trust. And I did trust him, more than anyone I'd ever known. Yet, a quiet unease began to grow inside me, like a small crack in glass you can't unsee once you've noticed it. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset from the balcony, Lucas seemed distant again. The sky was painted with gold and crimson, but he didn't look up once. "You're somewhere else," I said softly. He looked at me, startled, as if caught in a thought he didn't want to explain. "I'm just tired, Ethan," he said after a pause. "Things have been complicated at work." His tone was gentle, but there was something heavy behind it. I wanted to ask more, to press for the truth, but fear held me back. What if I didn't like the answer, so I smiled, pretending everything was fine. That's the thing about love, it teaches you how to lie to yourself beautifully. Despite the growing tension, there were still moments that reminded me why I'd fallen for him. Like the night we drove out to the pier after midnight, just to listen to the waves. He held my hand, thumb tracing small circles against my skin, and whispered, "If I ever hurt you, promise you'll tell me before it's too late." I didn't understand why he said that then. It sounded like a warning, though I brushed it off as sentiment. As months passed, his absences grew longer. Sometimes he'd disappear for entire weekends, saying he had to visit clients in another city. He always came back with the same smile, the same tenderness, but something about him felt altered, like he was returning from a place I couldn't follow. I told myself to stop overthinking. People have secrets, even the ones who love you. And maybe that's okay. But deep down, I knew something was shifting between us, something I couldn't quite name. The last peaceful night we shared came unexpectedly. Lucas had cooked dinner, badly, as usual, and we ended up ordering pizza instead. We sat on the couch, laughing about nothing. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You make me forget who I used to be." I didn't understand the sadness in his eyes when he said it, but I remember wanting to freeze that moment forever. He kissed my forehead, whispering, "I love you, Ethan. Don't ever doubt that." And though I smiled, something about the way he said it felt like a goodbye disguised as love. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I told myself I was imagining things. That love doesn't unravel this quietly. But as I watched the moonlight slide across his face, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was already slipping away, one secret at a time. What I didn't know then was that the truth wasn't just about another person or another life. It was something deeper, something that would make me question everything I believed about love, honesty, and how well we can ever really know someone. And it all began the moment he said he loved me. When Ethan returned home from the retreat, the silence felt sharper than before. The kitchen light hummed faintly, and Anna's voice floated from the living room as she discussed a project on the phone. She smiled when she saw him but didn't rise from the couch. Her eyes were kind, familiar, and utterly distant. He hugged her, mechanical and brief, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. It didn't stir anything. Not warmth. Not ache. Just nothing. That night, as they lay side by side, Ethan stared at the ceiling, tracing the thin crack running above their bed. He wanted to tell her something, anything, about how the retreat had made him feel. About how someone had reminded him what it meant to be present. But the words felt foreign, like trying to speak a language he hadn't practiced in years. Instead, he said softly, "Maybe I'll start going to the gym again." Anna murmured a sleepy yes, already halfway into dreams. He joined a local fitness center the following week. Lucas wasn't supposed to be there. Ethan didn't even know where he lived, but when he walked into the weight room on a quiet Tuesday evening, he saw him. Lucas looked up from adjusting a barbell, surprise flickering into a grin. "Ethan Cole," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Didn't expect to see you here." Ethan laughed lightly. "Guess you're to blame. You made exercise sound therapeutic." Lucas chuckled. "It is, if you stop treating it like punishment." They talked again, longer this time, without the formality of a retreat. Lucas offered to help him with a routine, and Ethan accepted before his mind could catch up. The workouts became weekly, then twice a week. Then, somehow, it didn't matter what they were doing, Ethan found reasons to linger, excuses to stay a little longer. He liked the quiet moments most, the way Lucas listened without checking his phone, the subtle humor tucked between their conversations. Ethan felt disarmed by how easy it was to exist around him, how the world seemed to pause when Lucas smiled. Weeks blurred. Anna noticed his new routine but didn't question it. She was busy, meetings, deadlines, dinners with clients. Sometimes Ethan wondered if she preferred it this way, two parallel lives sharing the same address. One evening, after a late session, Lucas suggested grabbing coffee. The cafe was nearly empty, warm light pooling over wooden tables. They talked about everything except the thing hanging between them, the unspoken gravity that made even silence feel charged. Ethan traced the rim of his mug and said, "You make things sound simple." Lucas shrugged. "They usually are, until we convince ourselves they're not." The honesty in his tone unsettled Ethan. He wanted to argue, to say life wasn't that easy, that there were promises and consequences, but what came out was quieter. "I don't even know what I want anymore." Lucas met his eyes. "You just told me what you want. You want to know." It was the first time in years Ethan felt someone understood him without translation. They left together. The night air was cool, damp with the smell of rain. When they reached the parking lot, Ethan hesitated. "Thanks for the coffee," he said. His voice came out smaller than intended. Lucas smiled faintly. "Anytime." Neither moved. The space between them was thin, breath, hesitation, pulse. Then Lucas stepped back, giving him a quiet exit. "Get home safe, Ethan." For days, Ethan couldn't stop replaying that moment, the way his name had sounded, the softness in Lucas's eyes. He tried to push it away, but it followed him into his dreams, into his mornings, into every quiet hour he shared with Anna where conversation had turned into static. A week later, after another late workout, it happened. Rain fell hard that night, slicking the sidewalks in silver. Ethan was about to leave when Lucas offered him a towel. "You'll get soaked walking to the car." "Wouldn't be the worst thing," Ethan said with a half smile, or, Lucas replied gently, "you could wait it out." They stood by the window, watching the storm thrash against the glass. The gym was empty now, lights dimmed except for the glow from the vending machine. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and rain. Lucas leaned against the wall, his voice low. "You ever feel like you're living a version of yourself that someone else wrote?" Ethan turned to him. "Every day." The truth in his voice cracked something open. Lucas's gaze held his, steady but kind. "You don't owe anyone a version of you that doesn't feel true." Ethan swallowed. "That's not how real life works." Lucas took a slow breath. "Maybe not. But real life shouldn't mean pretending." There was a silence then, long, unbearable. When Lucas reached out, his hand brushed Ethan's arm, light as breath. It wasn't bold or desperate, it was a question. And in that fleeting contact, Ethan felt the weight of every choice he hadn't made. He didn't move away. Time slowed, the storm outside softening into rhythm. There was no grand declaration, no sudden confession, just an unspoken understanding that something irreversible had shifted. Ethan left shortly after, heart hammering, the taste of guilt and relief tangled on his tongue. He drove home in silence, windshield wipers beating time against thoughts he couldn't sort. Anna was asleep when he entered the bedroom. Her side of the bed was warm, the lamp still on. He stood there for a long time, watching her breathe, wondering how love could turn into distance so quietly. He turned off the light and lay down, eyes open to the dark. He didn't know what line he had crossed exactly, only that he'd crossed it. The next morning, Anna made pancakes, humming softly to herself. "You've been in a good mood lately," she said, smiling without suspicion. "Must be those gym endorphins." Ethan managed a weak laugh. "Maybe." But inside, a storm was building. Not the kind that destroys everything instantly, but the slow, patient kind that erodes, drop by drop. Days passed. He told himself he would stop seeing Lucas, that he would bury the feelings before they grew roots. Yet each time he tried, something stronger pulled him back, the rare comfort of being seen without pretense. He began to notice everything differently, the texture of rain against glass, the echo of footsteps in empty halls, the fragile beauty in uncertainty. Lucas had changed the way he looked at the world, and at himself. One evening, standing in front of the mirror, Ethan barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes held a brightness he hadn't seen in years, but behind it lingered fear of what this awakening might cost. He remembered Lucas's words, "Sometimes risk is just another word for truth." Ethan exhaled, steady and quiet. For the first time in his life, he understood what that meant, and though he didn't know where it would lead, he knew one thing with startling clarity: he could no longer return to the way things were. Ethan began to measure his days in silences. The ones that stretched too long at breakfast, the ones that filled the car on the drive home, and the ones that pressed between him and Anna like a wall neither dared to touch. The house had never been so tidy, so calm, so hollow that he still went to the gym, but less now, afraid of what he might feel each time Lucas looked at him. When they did see each other, the conversations were careful. There was no need for words to recall what had happened, it existed quietly in the air, an echo that wouldn't fade. One afternoon, as Ethan packed up his laptop, Lucas appeared at the doorway, his presence quiet but certain. "You've been avoiding me," he said softly. Ethan glanced up, startled. "I've just been busy." Lucas shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've been running." Ethan sighed, closing the laptop. "You think this is simple? You think I can just step out of one life and into another?" Lucas leaned against the doorframe, eyes steady. "I think you're already halfway gone from the one you're in." The words landed hard, but not cruelly. They were true in a way that hurt more than any accusation could. Ethan wanted to deny it, to defend the life he had built, the marriage he had vowed to protect. But the truth had already begun to live under his skin, too real to silence. That night, he came home late. Anna was waiting at the dining table, her phone face down, untouched. "You've missed dinner 3 times this week," she said, her voice even. Ethan hesitated. "Work's been heavy." "Don't," she interrupted, eyes searching his face. "Don't say it if it's not true." The air thickened. Ethan sat across from her, fingers tracing the wood grain of the table. "Anna, I don't know how to explain this." "Then start with what you can." Her tone wasn't angry, just tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of holding something together alone. That he drew a breath, his voice trembling despite the calm. "I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Is there someone else?" He hesitated too long, and that silence said everything. Anna's jaw tightened. "I thought so." She rose, pacing to the window. "You used to talk to me, Ethan. You used to laugh. I kept waiting for you to come back." "I tried," he whispered. "But something changed." "I changed." She turned, eyes shining with hurt and disbelief. "Was it worth it? Whoever he is, was it worth breaking us?" He couldn't answer. The weight of his own guilt closed around his throat. Anna's expression softened, but her voice remained steady. "You should figure out who you are before you decide who you love." He nodded, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. "I'm sorry." "I know." She brushed past him, heading toward the stairs. "But sorry doesn't rebuild what's already gone." That night, Ethan slept on the couch. The sound of rain returned, like the world was repeating itself, washing him clean and dirtying him all at once. In the morning, he packed a small bag, nothing dramatic, just a few clothes and his sketchbook. Anna didn't stop him. She only asked, "Will you come back?" "I don't know," he said truthfully. He left before the sun rose, the city still heavy with mist. For the first time, he had no destination, just the quiet certainty that he couldn't keep living as 2 different men. He stayed in a small apartment downtown, barely furnished, the walls pale and empty. He began sketching again, faces, silhouettes, the curve of light against rain-streaked glass. For the first time in years, the act of creating didn't feel like work. It felt like breathing. Lucas visited once, unannounced. He brought takeout and a cautious smile. "How's freedom treating you?" Ethan laughed, soft and hollow. "It's quieter than I expected." They ate on the floor, the city humming below. Lucas didn't ask for promises, didn't offer solutions. He just sat there, listening. When their hands brushed, it felt different this time, gentle, unhurried, free of the tremor of secrecy. "I don't know what comes next," Ethan said after a while. "You don't need to," Lucas replied. "You just need to keep choosing honesty." It wasn't romance that bound them, it was understanding. The kind of connection that didn't demand ownership, only truth. Weeks passed. Ethan started therapy, something Lucas had quietly encouraged. He spoke about fear, guilt, identity, the 1,000 pieces of himself he'd hidden behind routine. He began to understand that love wasn't a single moment of passion or comfort, but a practice of being seen and allowing it. Anna sent him a message one evening, "I hope you're finding peace." I think we both needed distance. That he stared at the words for a long time before replying, "I am. Thank you, for everything." That night, he took a walk through the city. The streets were slick with rain again, lights reflecting off puddles like pieces of broken glass. He passed couples under umbrellas, strangers hurrying home, and for once he didn't feel envy. Just a quiet gratitude for the storm that had finally forced him to move. He paused by a storefront window, his reflection half blurred by rain. The man staring back looked older, worn, but real. There was no hiding in his eyes now. No performance. Lucas's voice came back to him, "Sometimes risk is just another word for truth." He smiled faintly, whispering to his reflection, "And truth is what finally set me free." The rain softened, tapering into mist. Ethan turned away from the glass and began to walk again, slower this time, as if relearning the rhythm of his own steps. The city stretched ahead, endless and alive. He didn't know where he was headed, and for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare him, because beneath the weight of loss and the quiet ache of memory, something new had begun to bloom, small, fragile, but undeniable, hope. And though his story wasn't finished, Ethan understood at last that change wasn't betrayal, it was becoming. The night closed around him gently, the city lights blinking like promises in the distance, and he walked toward them without looking back.